Welcome everyone on this lunch debate. It will be a lunch debate also in English because we have our guests, our LIAS fellows. So LIAS is the Leuven Institute of Advanced Study, and so as you know, these fellows are gathering here to discuss the theme on water shortage and water flooding. It's become a serious problem with climate change, and that problem will become bigger and bigger. So we need to prepare ourselves, and so the whole question is how can we inform, how can we force, how can we create a kind of environment in the future that will make it possible to be resilient towards these kinds of problems. And so it's on the theoretical level, it's on the economical level, it's on the communication level that we need to find solutions. So Jill Roberts will introduce the discussion, and then Bernd Klauer will give a kind of work. Jill is from the University of Glasgow, and she's especially busy with private law and water issues. And Bernd is also studying in Leipzig and in a center who is trying to figure out how you can deal with water problems and how they can find solutions for these kind of things. So I give the word to Jill.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming along. It's lovely. It's been lovely being here in Leuven, and I've learned a lot in the process of the Metaforum so far. So what I want to talk about today is the arguments that are raised against natural flood management and some of the potential solutions in that context. So what is natural flood management? It often involves working with nature to slow the flow of water, increasing the storage of water in the land, and restoring the natural function of the rivers as much as possible. So measures can involve planting trees along the river, creating wetlands, re-meandering rivers, and blocking drainage systems which take water off the land very quickly. And these processes are very different to the more traditional methods of hard engineering systems of building flood banks or dam systems to keep water off the land. Now, a problem that we have in Scotland, and I suspect also in other countries in Europe, is that a lot of rivers have been artificially modified, and therefore they don't look like the picture to the left, which is a naturally functioning river that meanders through the landscape, that has a lot of trees, but instead they look a lot more like the rivers to the right, if you can still call that a river. It's been straightened, they're used as drainage channels for agricultural fields. They've also often been deepened, and the trees alongside them have been taken away. So this is very far away from the way that a natural river functions, a natural functioning river system. For natural flood management really to operate then, there's quite a lot of work in order to restore rivers from this state to this state. And it also involves quite a lot of capital work, so really changing the landscape. In the context of climate change with more extreme weather events and high levels of rainfall, these artificially straightened and deepened rivers generate actually a huge amount of energy and can sometimes channel water directly into towns and cities in a way that they've never done before. So a researcher just this morning on the news in Scotland said that there was 20% more rainfall in the rivers this winter due to climate change, which I think we've all also appreciated in Flanders as well. Okay, so it's costly to do this kind of capital works and changing the rivers to have a more natural function. But there is a creature that can do quite a lot of the work for free, which is the beaver. So beavers are ecosystem engineers. They work 365 days a year. They change the environment around them in order to restore river function and slow the flow of water. So as you probably know, they dam the water courses where they're found, they create wetlands, and the wetlands really have a lot of positive benefits, not only for natural flood management, but for biodiversity generally. So they create new habitats for fish, insects, and birds. And the habitats they create can be very positive for water filtration and also prevent the spread of wildfires, which in a Scottish context is also becoming a lot higher risk. So due to the positive benefits that beavers can have, Scotland is in the process of reintroducing this species. They were hunted to extinction in the 17th century, so they've been kind of absent for about 400 years, and then there's been a trial to reintroduce the beaver. So in 2009 we had some areas, or a particular area, where we introduced them, and there were also some vigilante groups that released them in an area. And after that time, in 2019, the Scottish Government granted them European Protected Species status, which means that they're allowed to stay. We're naturalized immigrants. They're actually Bavarian and Norwegian in origin, so we accept them back. And neither they or their habitats can be affected without a license or protected. We realise that has a big consequence for land use, so we've created in Scotland a beaver strategy to guide their reintroduction. There's a beaver advisory group, and to note my interest in this, I'm chair of the Scottish Beaver Advisory Group. So there's 2 established areas of beaver populations, and just last year we released 3 families into the Cairngorms National Park. We've only got 2 national parks in Scotland, but again, beavers had been absent from that national park for 400 years, so it was a big moment. I'm in the jacket, the bright blue jacket that looks like a Deliveroo jacket, which is like delivering food parcels everywhere. But this is the release of a beaver into Loch Lomond National Park. I think it's probably the highlight of my career so far. That was back in November. And they're now, that couple, so this was a female beaver, the male was also released. That couple is now creating their own habitats as we speak. Okay, so I've been talking about all the challenges, all the benefits that beavers can bring, but of course you can imagine there are also some challenges. So in creating wetland habitats, there are a broad range of biodiversity benefits, and some people have been comparing old Ordnance Survey maps in Scotland with existing Ordnance Survey maps, and what the beavers are often doing is recreating wetlands where they would have existed naturally. So they are putting features back into the landscape that they used to exist in. So this is a kind of example of a beaver wetland on the left in Dunkeld, which is quite close to where I'm from. The beavers had dammed the stream upstream, which means that there's an expansion of the wetland, and the loch, then the lake, holds a lot more water. And you can see the felled trees that they have carried out in order to build the dam. They've really created a huge dam over a long period of time to create this wetland. However, you can imagine that they also cause some interference with existing land use. So there, as I said, there are 3 different populations at the moment. In Scotland, we have an area called Tayside, which is where our prime agricultural land is. It's also the biggest habitat of beavers. So we've only got 10% of our land in Scotland, which is prime agricultural land, where we can grow crops, a variety of different crops, and this is also where the beavers are. So the picture on the right shows where there has been interference with flood banks due to beaver activity. So this is, if I show you closer, this is the river, and this is the flood bank. And because of burrowing activity, as soon as there was a big flood this winter with the storms, and there's burrowing in the flood banks, then the river went straight through the flood banks and then caused this massive scouring in the agricultural field. The farmers then blamed this on the beavers, that this is the fault of the beavers that are interfering with the flow of the river and the protection of the flood banks. So you can see beavers do contribute to the issue, but they're really part of a much bigger problem, in the sense that we are farming on flooded areas that are going to become more flooded due to climate change, and our existing structures really are to build vulnerable flood banks that are made out of silty soil, because that's what's the soil that's there. And this is just getting aggravated in the context of beavers being there. So in this context, farmers and crofters being small-scale farmers, they say they're due compensation. And this is where the law comes in. They say they have suffered damage from the activities of an animal, and the protection of the animal was the decision of the Scottish Government, and their private property rights have therefore been interfered with, and compensation is the way to deal with this interference. So what are my views on this issue? My role as chair of the Scottish Beaver Advisory Group, it's been really fascinating to see the different perspectives of the stakeholders in the group. I think one of the biggest challenges for those in the group is that this animal has agency and is creating its own environment for its own needs, and doesn't care about anyone else. And in a sense, the beaver is just like us. But people feel like they need to blame a human for the actions, and so they blame the government. There's also a real lack of trust in beaver-led flood management, in a sense. So we have feeling that really the beaver is not going to make the best decisions in terms of where to put the flood management schemes, and that the flood embankments that have been built for many years are what we should rely on still, even though they're continually failing us. So I think really something needs to be done differently in this space. And after that big flood that happened in Tayside in November, there was £4 million made available by the government to rebuild these flood banks. But really, I think that's just putting bad money after bad money. So should we compensate farmers for the loss of their land? My argument is no. I think that sends the wrong message. The land is still in the ownership of the farmer. It just serves a different function. One that is potentially beneficial for the farmer in creating more resilience in the landscape and more resilience for the communities downstream. However, I think we really do need to think about collaborative solutions where the beaver is aggravating existing vulnerability. And I do understand across Europe, it's the same in Scotland, farmers are feeling so much pressure due to changing requirements on them. I think that they are obviously the most clearly impacted by hosting this species on their land. So one option is a model that we have in Scotland called enhanced shepherding. So we've also reintroduced the sea eagle, not seagull, but sea eagle. So bigger bird, likes to eat lambs, and we've introduced these in areas where there's also farming and sheep production. Reintroduced species, the farmers have also been upset because during lambing season, their lambs are being taken by the eagles. What we have set up, the Nature Conservation Agency has set up a scheme that encourages farmers to collect information on the eagles and send back to the Nature Conservation Agency, and they're paid for their time in the monitoring of the species. So this information is then used to inform the management scheme, but also encourage a collaborative approach to the management of the species. So people are out looking for eagle impacts anyway, but it's recognition that actually this should be fairly compensated by the Nature Conservation Agency. For beaver management, there's usually somebody who is walking up and down the streams to look out for dams in any event, and I think this ensures that this person would be paid for their work. And again, the Nature Conservation Agency can benefit from the information. I think we also need a stronger level of support for farmers who are suffering storm damage to create a more resilient landscape. So this would be to pilot projects where the government helps in the river restoration with the capital works for this to show that renaturalized rivers can build more resilience with beavers and can deliver a range of benefits. And I think we could see that the water storage in the context of water scarcity can also help. So Tayside is projected, where there's the best agricultural land, is also projected to have problems with water scarcity in the future. And there are already signs that water is scarce in Scotland, amazingly, despite the rain. And areas of beaver presence could also have more groundwater and more surface water due to the flow being slowed down in that wetland storage. So what does this have to do with the discussions that we've been having in the Metaforum? So we've touched on many of the themes, I think, about water management in the landscape. So we know that the current water management in the landscape is not water resilient, and that changing the situation requires both state action and private landowners or farmers. Law is one way that you can encourage behavioural change, but it's not enough, and sometimes it can also be a barrier to change. Private property rights and the kind of claim that compensation is needed is often a barrier to type of work that's necessary to create a more water resilient place. So here I'm trying to think beyond individual compensation claims towards a way that the frame could be changed, that farmers are considered as nature managers and they are paid for that work. National biodiversity and flood management is of course the role of the state, but the state can't do everything that's necessary, and we have to work in partnership with others to achieve national goals. It's a slow process, but I'm hoping that through taking the concerns of the farmers seriously and providing support and structure, as well as funding pilot studies, we can show the benefits of working with rather than against nature. So thank you for your concentration.
Yeah, my name is Bernd Klauer. I'm a water economist. I have to admit that I'm neither specialist in beavers nor in flood management. I'm working on trouts rather, or on water quality, but I had some really nice and interesting conversations with Jill, and that was a lot of fun. So here are my thoughts on the basis of our conversation, and on the basis that my wife is a biologist and likes creatures like that. So that's flood prevention. Maybe there are some things are doubled, but flood prevention is an issue here in Flanders as well as in Netherlands, of course. And there was still in mind is a big flood from 1953. Which also coins the attitude towards flooding. And the response, that was huge technical efforts to protect the land from sea flooding. And that's still overarching, the main approach towards flood protection is technical ideas, and we have seen that also for that river Ty. Was it this big river? You have, as you said, you have river banks, dikes alongside a river, polders, dams, and reservoirs. Dams in the upstream part to control the flow and to cut the peak of a flood. So that's how reservoirs are used. Or if you are within a city, you have flood walls. And the idea is to get the water out of the landscape, or hold it out of the landscape, hold it within the rivers, but the rivers are not separated from the rest of the landscape. That's the basic idea of this flood management. Then there's a second or a third pillar. I start with the third pillar. These are additional measures to, if there's a flood, then to directly act. So there are alarm systems, plans, who should be alarming. That was actually one of the reasons in '53 it was so bad, and it was also the reason that the Ahr River flooding in Germany in '21 was so bad, because that was not in place. This alarm system didn't work. So that is one thing you can do. You could do private prevention a lot. A lot of damages by flooding is done by oil tanks in the cellar, and these oil tanks, if they are flooded and go into the landscape, they cause enormous damages. So just taking care of these, that they don't fill up, and private flood prevention is quite effective. Has been shown the difference between the flood damages in the Elbe River from 2002 and 2013. There has been a rising of awareness that there is a risk of flooding, and many people just didn't store valuable things in their basement. They put it up, and that already helped a lot to reduce the flood damages, even so that the flood in 2013 was higher than the one in 2002. The damages were a lot lower. Insurances is a different thing. So here it is the idea to prevent or ease damages just by doing something. And the third idea is, here the beaver comes into play, is to hold the water in the landscape upstream, that is not downstream. And here, so creation of retention areas is a way of doing it. And one thing is, and I liked your picture, I would like to show it again, but I don't have it, where there is this small pond next to the river, and in between was a dike. And the dike was protecting, not people, was protecting farmland here. It was, and that's interesting issue. Though the protection was done for farming, and maybe now it's a discussion in Germany. And we just had 2 weeks ago a meeting with the ministry from Saxony-Anhalt, the environmental ministry, and there is alongside the Elbe River to what is this? Not remove, but to relocate the dikes. That the floodplain is a lot further wider. So either remove the dikes next to the and give more room to the rivers. That creates again, it cuts on farmland, of course, because then the farmland is flooded once in a while. But they argue it could be cheaper to compensate them, the farmers, every 10 years when the flood is coming, instead of building these high dams or dikes, or I always mix them up, the dikes, and maintain them. That's also pretty costly. But the costs are borne by the state, of course. So here, a different idea holds water in the landscape, so that's not so fast flushing down, and the downstream side is protected. And as you said, beavers are like human beings. They change the landscape according to their needs. Sometimes our needs are maybe also in parallel, not just opposing. Here is, I found this, it's not my, how beavers alter the geomorphology. That's quite nice. So they normally they start with narrow, with these narrow rivers, and then there's a lot of force, power of the river. This is, leads to that it is pushed to the side if there's a dam in between. Though it widens the river first, then the river, these new dams built by the beaver are more effective, and sediments come up. The sediments fill up the floodplain, make it wider, and even slower the water, so holding back the water in the landscape. And also they create an entire different environment here, which has several provides several ecosystem services, a lot more diverse floodplain. Actually, all what we need, and it's not just flood protection; it's also biodiversity conservation, which is then revealed. But we, of course, on the other hand, have a loss of agricultural land, and also a very nice satellite image from Alaska, but also the beaver was here. A satellite image from 1980 and 2019, 40 years in between, and it's the same creek, and you see the enormous effect of beaver populations changing that creek here. It flows in this direction, and here are the river dams. The beaver dams are the pink arrows, and you see the width. It's about 100 to 200 meters, and this is about 800 meters, so you can calculate this. Several hectares are changed by the beaver. So that's quite an effect, and also quite a. So that's of course a kind of experimental way of looking at it. In different landscapes they look different. But okay, so it's a loss of several hectares, of land. And that's it's blurred. That's a picture from Germany showing. Okay, yeah, this cannot be used. Here's a beaver was over there. This is all too wet to make real agriculture here. Now my kind of analysis of this beavers versus farmers. That's a conflict. That's quite clear. And let's analyze the conflict first. Though the beavers convert farmland into beaverland, which is a kind of an expropriation. So do the beavers steal the land from farmers is the first question. But of course that's absurd because beavers are not no legal subjects. So that's why they're not, at least in our system, they're no legal subjects. That's why they cannot bear the responsibility, and also not. So you said, okay, that's the bad guys are the government people because they recolonized the beaver, and so they indirectly expropriate the farmers. Expropriates the land is still to the farmers, but it's the property rights are limited. You call this, there's a legal term that's not a material it's a material expropriation because the property rights are limited. It's not a formal expropriation because it's still, their name is, as an owner is still in the records. Okay, but it is an expropriation, and even material expropriation means that there is a loss of the value of that land. And the question is, what is the value of the land before and after? And though they are different, now the economist comes into play, there are different types of values. First is a production value. This land can be used for productive purposes. You grow crops, you sell the crops, and that's a production value of it. And of course, there's a loss of production value. Instead, what you gain is the value of flood protection, water retention. It is an ecosystem services, and maybe there are other ecosystem services because it's a habitat for other important and maybe protected species. And now, who benefits from that? That's maybe also an interesting question. Who is really the one who benefits from these values? Though the production value is with the farmers, so there's a loss of production value, though the loss for the farmers. The value for the flood protection is, and the value of the habitat is with the beavers, but it's mainly with the general society. It's all of us who are, and maybe with flood protection, particularly the people downstream who are benefiting from that. So that's a rearranging of property and of values which is taking place. And the question now, should the farmers be compensated for this real loss of their value? And different answers are possible. No, because there's a reason for this expropriation. The reason is that beavers are protected by the Flora Fauna Habitat Directive, which is still in place, even though there is a Brexit has happened accidentally. But they didn't change all their laws. It was already put into national law, though it's still there. Beavers are protected, and the Flora Fauna Habitat Directive works. If there is a protected species somehow living, immediately the habitat for that species is protected. So there's a protection soon moving with the beaver automatically. So that is the mechanism of this Flora Fauna Habitat Directive. And that is in place. Though the farmers have to accept it legally, so they wouldn't have a chance if they go to court to accuse the government. On the other hand, from a perspective of maybe who wants to still speak with farmers or wants to find a solution, there are some these losses are real. The loss of the production value is real, and maybe we should find something. You try to have this story of the eagle protection, where it says a kind of an indirect. I don't want directly gives you the money, but I have a kind of a mechanism to come around and find something which is compensating a little. Maybe need not be too shy, and could it be more directly? But I think there are reasons also from a political point of view, not from a pure legal point of view, to give them some compensation. But there is, of course, an upper limit. The upper limit should be the market value of the farmland, which is, I just looked it up in Scotland. It's similar to Germany. It's about 25,000 euros per hectare. And here in Flanders, because everything is so dense, it's 60,000 if the internet gave me the right thing. So question is, that's our upper bounds. The farmer unions, they are pretty clever and always powerful. I don't know why, but they are. In political discussions, they always ask for compensation for everything. If there are dikes, and first they ask the government to build dikes to protect their farmland, then they want to remove them, then they want to be compensated for the removal. That's the discussion what is going on in Germany. So it needs, again, though the final say is with the government, who needs to find, or maybe Miss Yu as a chairwoman of that to find a real good solution to have peace within the people that they still have, because the farmers also have a different leverage. They what they do, they just shot the beavers. It's forbidden, but they just do it. They do it everywhere. They do it in Germany. They do it like the wolves and all these protections. They are endangered if there's no consensus that we really want to protect them. Okay, yeah, thank you.
I imagine that there are some questions. Please ask them. Yes, the micro will be there.
Argument also brought forward by the Farmers Union again and again. Do we need all the farmland for producing? I don't know. So from the point of view of climate protection, you would say that meat production needs so much farmland. For example, I know it's the number for Germany, 70% of the farmland is used for meat production. Have you known that? If you just 70% of farmland is used for fodder production, which is used for meat production, and that's the way it is. And though for a more healthy kind of nutrition, we wouldn't need so much farmland.
In Scotland, I think the area that I'm talking about, a lot of the land is used for whiskey. And I'm not against whiskey. So, but I think it's very important if we have the area that's 10%, really, it's a very small amount. A lot of Scotland is just moorland and highland area that you can't grow anything on. So this area is where all the conflicts happen for good reason. And I think we need to be very careful about sacrificing land which can produce food, especially when we've seen the grain conflicts in the Ukrainian war. I think we have to really think very carefully. So I don't automatically say this isn't important. When I talk with the farmers, I think their concerns are really important. What I'm trying to think about is how to create a more resilient landscape for them as well. So these flood banks have been affected by storms for centuries, but now it's getting almost, what's the word, like it's so unprofitable to keep building them. So we are at risk of losing people farming in these regions because they're just losing money in building the flood banks. So I think the beavers can be a part of the solution in order to preserve that landscape. But it won't help if we're at different ends of the spectrum, which is why it's really challenging to chair that group. But I mean, when I'm cycling around Flanders, your land is incredible in comparison with Scotland. It's so fertile. This is paradise for me. It's really amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. And the cows. Yeah.
But this protection, the beaver is protected, but the dams, are they protected as well?
Yeah, so from the Habitats Directive, yes, but there's a time, so if the dam it's 2 weeks until the protection kicks in. So when he starts to build, you can dismantle the dam within 2 weeks, but after it's established, then you have to leave it. But it's interesting what you say, that it's like the protection follows him wherever he goes. You can get a license to shoot them, but that's only in instances of severe damage, so, or risk to life. So if they start burrowing under a railway track or under a gas or oil canister, which they do, then then you can have licenses, but you have to be very careful in granting the license.
So you can make a kind of cost-benefit analysis, try to figure out who pays and who earns. And then, of course, the question is who takes the burden.
Yeah.
The collectivity is good with beavers, but the burden of this kind of thing comes to the farmers, I suppose. Yeah. So in the story about compensation, if immediately there is the idea the European law protects these kinds of things, then there is no matter of compensation. It's just, and I have sometimes the impression that indeed these laws are good for the common good, but then of course those who need to take action to make it possible that that law can function, all the farmers. It's the same with the nitrogen problem. All is right for the good of society, but those who need to arrange this and to pay for it are then the farmers. So in the compensation scheme, you seem to suggest, yes, you can create a kind of elaboration. There are also benefits for them, but are these benefits enough to make it possible for them that it is still profitable, or how is this done?
So I think, I suppose in terms of strict law, if we were in a court, as you said, and the farmer said, I am due compensation, I don't think they would succeed, because it's a protected species, they still have the land, it's not required from the Human Rights Convention. But what I am afraid of is that the legal requirements become so different to what people believe is good, that then you get people stopping farming, moving away from the area, or they just start shooting the beavers because they don't see any benefit, or they stop engaging with the Nature Conservation Agency at all because they think, you are all against us, you don't understand what we're doing, we're providing food for your nation, and all I have to do is deal with this animal that is flooding my land. So I think that I'm trying to see a way of co-producing the management, and that we're all dealing with this together. But you're right, what they also say is, yeah, we're all dealing with this together, but I'm the one with the beaver on my land. I won't say there's anything good about Brexit, but one thing that is happening is that we're also having to completely reform our agricultural subsidy regime because we didn't have one because it was all EU. And in that process now, we are saying to farmers that 50% of their agricultural subsidy will be guaranteed anyway, but beyond that, you will often have to show that you are taking environmental measures. Those with beavers will be able to show hosting biodiversity. So that's another way of ensuring that still the use of the land is profitable for those who are farming.
Is the law just? So if that kind of European, with us, this is still the European way of dealing with things, is it just in the sense that indeed it's good for the common good, but all the farmers sufficiently protected, especially because it's for them already quite hard to survive. Otherwise you could say, well, we don't no longer need farmers, but of course then we have a problem with food production.
I think that the system that we had previously, so we don't know the details yet, the system we had previously benefited large farms more than anything else. And that was not just in a Scottish context. So we have people who are small scale growers, and they were not supported at all. So it helped if you accumulated a lot of land and then could have effective machine, and there are big landowners in Scotland, but then we just give them more money. Really, I think the people in the highlands and islands who are in sparsely populated places were not benefiting from that regime. And those are the people who've actually suffered from sea eagles more than anyone else. The bigger farmers are the ones hosting the beavers.
So from an economic point of view, how bigger you are, the agriculture industry is benefiting from it, but the small farmers are pushed out. Now, from an economic point of view, one could say that's the law, the economic law of the right of the most strongest. Yeah, but of course, a lot of people have questions with this kind of way of dealing with things. How do you think, as an economist, about these kind of things?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was very harsh with my first answer to farmers, and there's a different perspective. I want to raise this, and then you just open it. That we have to think about what kind of agriculture do we want as a society, and my general feeling, I better know the situation in Germany, but I think it's similar in Scotland and similar in Flanders, is that we try to discuss the farming by talking about this subsidy system, about cross-compliance, about this, and try to indirectly fix this system, but the system itself is ill. It is, so as you said, or suggested, it's right. As far as I know, I'm also not a real expert on that. That the big farmers earn most, and that's agriculture. The chemical industry has a lot of influence on the entire system. Also, who is owning what? It's very interesting that there's an unfair distribution of who is owning the farmland, who is owning the big farms, and who is getting income out of it. But I also fully agree. Everybody needs food and needs healthy food, and we want to produce it not all in South America. We want to produce it where we're living, and we also have an idea of that we're not depending too much on, let's see, on Russia, Ukraine, and so on. We want to have it here. These are strong arguments and strong things which need to be taken into consideration. But it is what I would like to have is, and what I really miss if I look at the German government, is a discussion on how our agricultural system should look like in 10 years, 20 years, and then work on a concept and try to get this, to make this real.
Okay, thank you for the lovely pictures and the beavers. My question is, the argument now is more an utilitarian argument. In fact, it's a coincidence between the protection of the environment and the protection of the beavers. And do you think that could be a possibility to extrapolate this argument in other regions and say, okay, if we care for the lovely animals, we care for the environment, or sometimes it's the opposite, that you have the kind of reproductions that the beavers have now in Scotland, but perhaps the number is too big, and if it would become very big, the number of beavers, it would be complicated, such as the mouses. You have a lot of mouses in Australia, or other insects, or birds, whatever. And that means, okay, now we have the coincidence, it is nice, we protect the beavers, we protect the environment, and we have to show the farmers a limit because of that. But it is only that, or is the wisdom of nature that can be used in that case, or this case can be used as an example for protecting or realizing the wisdom of nature. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's always kind of contextually specific with species and impacts. So there is a rodent in Louisiana, for example, called the nutria, and it's an invasive species, but it's been causing a huge amount of problems in their wetland areas because it chews up a lot of the vegetation there and actually causes further flooding because it's affecting the natural functions. So I think we need to consider the impact of the species in the particular place and the interactions with the environment. Beavers are naturally very territorial, so they spread across the landscape and then they will start fighting each other. So it's not like you'll have a huge number of beavers along one river system. They will fight each other. But there could come to a point where we've reached almost a maximum number in terms of population, and then you think, well, how do you manage that population, and what are the social levers that you could do in that context? Beavers naturally have their fur, they've got also other attributes in their bodies which are useful to humans. So we could think about it in terms of like deer management in Scotland, that we can have meat from the deer and their fur is also useful to us. But I suppose it needs to be a sustainable population in that context before you take that next step. I mean, deer is just another huge problem in Scotland. We should be eating deer all the time. So free range, very healthy, like give school meals, I would make deer, only deer. So I think in that way, I suppose it's just like, what are the interactions, what's the population, what are the impacts that it's having, and thinking about that ecosystem as a whole.
Trees. These beavers are quite strong in putting all kinds of trees away. So the beginning was a story about the meanders and all the trees around it. But what with the trees if the beavers are there?
Yeah. So again, the interaction is really not easy. They don't. So we have on this group that I have, we also have the Forestry Commission. They're not that concerned because they don't like conifers, so they don't take down the conifers. They do like native young trees like birch and willow and this kind of thing, but often they don't kill the tree. It will naturally coppice and then it grows again. But where you're trying to do riparian planting and beaver reintroduction at the same time, there can be challenges. So it's almost like you need to stage this if possible. But they don't, it's not like they eradicate all trees around them.
They're like apples.
Yeah, they love turnips and carrots then. If you have a turnip farm, it's bad news.
In our country, of course, our country is far more densely populated, and so the rivers go through on the border of gardens and so on. Is there also a solution for that? In Scotland, of course, there is so much not populated room for such a kind of intervention. Could that be feasible in Flanders too?
I think you have beavers in the Delia, because I went running and I was like. So you know they're really quite shy generally. I mean, I suppose if they're going to dig under your gas canister, that is a particular problem. But you can create things that protect these. I mean, I would love to have a beaver in my garden. Maybe not in my swimming pool. I saw that there was a beaver had got into somebody's swimming pool. That's maybe a little bit problematic.
Beavers, and I'm living to a creek, but I wouldn't like to have them in my garden because they eat the apple trees, and that's. But I've read some numbers that say need about 1 or 2 hectares per family for their wood production, and that is not so enormous. So it is possible that it is restricted somehow to the riverbanks and then to the buffer strips.
In your introduction, you mentioned that beavers know better where to build these dams than we do, perchance. Is this an intuition, or could we, as human beings, just imitate, without the beavers, their mode of working?
I didn't say they know better,
okay.
But they in comparing with the maps, they're often replacing lost wetlands. So where there would be place for the wetlands before, but we've drained them. I'm not sure. So there are, when you look at a natural flood management handbook, they talk about woody structures that they put in the streams, but they take a lot of time to implement, and then they take a lot of time of maintenance, and it costs a lot of money. And all of this time I'm thinking, just put the beaver in there and he will do all this. But I think that the challenge is when our goals conflict. So they might have the best place for the landscape, but it will potentially be different to what we want. And it's funny in this context, talking with stakeholders about that seems to be the clash, that we can't tolerate a species that changes its environment just for its own benefit.
In a way, that could be an advantage as well, that we can not discuss it, but just say the beaver has decided that this is the best place.
Blame the beaver.
Anymore, I think we can close the session. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.